Hello, my name is Sarah Ahmed. In the last month, I've been launching the Feminist Killjoy Handbook, and we began with a launch event on March 2nd at Rich Mix in East London. And today, I've been hoping to upload the video of that event to share with you, to our wider community of feminist killjoys, only to find that I'd accidentally deleted the recording from my computer. So I can't do that. What I thought I would do, just as a gesture, is to share the introduction that I wrote for that event on March the 2nd. It's not going to be the same because for me, giving those words was giving them to a room of killjoys, and the atmosphere was so warm and electric. So I'm going to be presenting these words in my little studio here in my cottage instead, which is not the same thing, but it is something. So I'm going to give the words as I gave them on that evening. And I'm going to share the PowerPoint as well. So let me just share the screen first. My introduction, first part, is called Survival and Activism. Hello, my name is Sarah Ahmed. I am the author of the Feminist Killjoy Handbook and also your host this evening. It is not conventional for authors to host their own book launches, but this is a Killjoy launch, so it seems right that I do so. I'm so pleased to be joined by special guests tonight, Nimrao Shamir Magani, Joan Anim Adu, Nori Masood, Campbell X, as well as virtually by Fiona Nicole, who has written and performed for us a Killjoy song with a lyric and a chorus that is going to get in your head and stay there. The first part of the launch we focus on the theme of survival and activism, the second on creativity and connection, and then finally, we'll have a chance to reflect together on Killjoy Solidarity, which is also a hashtag for this event. If we end with Killjoy Solidarity, that's where we start. We start where we are, with all of you who are here, part of this event, this many, whether you are watching the live stream or are in the Rich Mix in East London. We are that many. To fill these rooms, virtual and actual, is an act of Killjoy Solidarity. We fill the rooms with our Killjoy Solidarity. Killjoy Solidarity is often how I sign my letters. In Killjoy Solidarity, Sarah, kiss, kiss. But it means more to me than a way of signing or signing off. For me, Killjoy Solidarity is a solidarity we express in the face of what we come up against. In the handbook, I offer what I call Killjoy truths or hard-won wisdoms, what we know because of what keeps coming up. Let me share the last truth offered in the book, which probably best explains what I mean by Killjoy Solidarity. Killjoy truth: the more we come up against, the more we need more. The more we need more. Sometimes, to be a feminist killjoy can feel like coming up against it, the world you oppose. Feeling joy, naming the problem, becoming the problem, can make us feel alone, shattered, and scared. I think of a student who wrote to me from a very painful place, giving me a trigger warning for the content she was to share. At the end of her letter, she said, "My killjoy shoulder is next to yours, and we are a crowd. I cannot see it at the moment, but I know it's there." I love this idea of a killjoy shoulder. Becoming feminist killjoys is how we lean on each other. We cannot always see a killjoy crowd, but we know it's there, and we are here. And that's one reason I wrote the Feminist Killjoy Handbook, to say we are here. Although I've written about feminist killjoys before, the handbook is the first book I've given them of their own. So why is their book a handbook? I made it so because I think of the book as a hand, a helping hand, an outstretched hand, perhaps also a killjoy shoulder. and a handle, how we hold on to something. A history can be a handle. It can help to know that where we are, others have been. When we travel with feminist killjoys, they become our companion. We need this companionship. My emphasis in the handbook is not only on what experiences of killing joy can take from us, the energy and time it can take to name the problem, let alone become the problem, but also what they can give to us. Whilst being a feminist killjoy can, without doubt, be messy and confusing, it can also lead to moments of clarity and illumination, sharpening our sense of the point of the work, of the purpose. So in addition to Killjoy truths, I offer Killjoy equations, Killjoy commitments, and Killjoy maxims. And in the second chapter, I also offer some Killjoy survival tips. And yes, my first tip to surviving as a feminist Killjoy is to become one. To become a feminist Killjoy is to get in the way of happiness or just get in the way. We can kill joy because we speak back, because we use words like sexism or racism or homophobia or transphobia or ableism to describe our experience, because we refuse to polish ourselves to cover over the injustices with a smile. We don't even have to say anything to kill joy. Some of us, Black people and people of colour, can kill joy by entering a room because our bodies are reminders of histories that get in the way of the occupation of space. We can kill joy because of how we mourn, or who we don't mourn, or who we do mourn. We can kill joy because of what we do not and will not celebrate, national holidays that mark colonial conquest or the birth of a monarch, for instance. We can kill joy by asking to be addressed by the right pronouns, or by correcting people if they use the wrong ones. We can kill joy by asking to change the room because the room they have booked is not accessible again. The negativity derives from a judgment, as if we're only doing something or saying something or being something to cause unhappiness or to make things more difficult for others. Killing joy becomes a world-making project when we refuse to be redirected away from an action by that judgment. We make a commitment. If saying what we say, doing what we do, being who we are causes unhappiness, that is what we are willing to cause. Killjoy commitment. I am willing to cause unhappiness. But it can be hard, precisely because the negativity of that judgment sticks to us, because eyes start rolling before we even say anything or do anything, as if to say, she would say that. Killjoy equation, rolling eyes equals feminist pedagogy. She would say that, we did say that. I think also of the negativity of words such as queer, which have historically been used as insults and that are full of vitality and energy because of that. I think reclaiming the feminist killjoy is a queer project. A killjoy party, a queer party, is a protest. And I wanted to have this party, this protest, all the more because of how many of us are under attack. Our claims to personhood dismissed as identity politics, our critiques as cancel culture, our lives treated not only as light and whimsical as lifestyles, but as endangering others, recruiting them. These attacks, which are relentless, designed to crush spirits, are directed especially to trans people right now. And can I express my killjoy solidarity to you today and every day? It can be exhausting having to fight for existence. Killjoy truth. When you have to fight for existence, fighting can become an existence. And so we need each other. We need to become each other's resources. Feminism can or should be such a resource. But what goes under the name of feminism, at least in the UK right now, is anti-queer as well as anti-trans, willing to use categories such as sex or nature or natal to exclude some of us, categories that many of us have long critiqued. We say no to this, and we'll keep saying no. Our lives are at stake. Our lives are at stake. And that no is louder when we say it together. That no is not just what we say now, it is behind us. It is how some of us came to be here. And I've learned from who came with me to be here. I wanted to say a little about the dedications of the handbook. You have before you 2 dedication pages. One of them is from my 2017 book, Living a Feminist Life, a book which had made the feminist Killjoy a central character in how I approached feminism. So I had already dedicated a book to you, to the work you do. If that one was for you, this one is too. I added a still doing your thing. Still. Killjoy truth. We have to keep saying it because they keep doing it. But even if we're saying it because of what they keep doing, we are heard as the ones repeating ourselves. Still, it matters. The handbook is also dedicated to Neela, Gulzar, and Bell. Bell Hooks appears everywhere in the handbook, and I dedicate the chapter on activism to her specifically. Why? Bell Hooks was always willing to name the problem. White supremacist, imperialist, capitalist patriarchy. She gives us so much Killjoy inspiration because she names it. She nails it every time. I also dedicate it to my aunt, Gulzar Bano. My auntie was a poet, and she wrote poems as forcefully and furiously and fiercely as she lived her life. And I dedicated the chapter on the Killjoy as poet specifically to my aunt. My aunt was an unmarried woman, a Muslim feminist, doing what she could to create a less harsh and less hostile world for women, especially poor women in Pakistan, a country created from the scattered remains of a violent imperial history. My aunt was not afraid to express her opinions. She might even have been called opinionated. I inherit so much from my auntie. The handbook is also dedicated to a dear friend, Neela Gupta. Neela died when I was writing my chapter on surviving as a feminist Killjoy, which I dedicated to them. Neela and I shared a love for Audre Lorde's work on survival, on how caring for oneself can be an act of political warfare. Neela was deeply committed to disability justice, as well as liberation for trans and queer people. I learned so much from Neela, not least how they roll their eyes and laugh at the very systems that wear us down. And sometimes Neela would roll their eyes at me for what I didn't get. And there's a lot that I didn't get. I think of one time that Neela came to a launch of my book, On Being Included. When I took a photo of them with the book, they had their fingers scrunched up like this. Neela explained afterwards, I am making quotation marks. It's ironic, about the inclusion narrative, exclamation point. How we laughed. I think of how Neela turned up. Whenever I organised something, Neela turned up if they could, even when it was really difficult for them to do so, even when it took so much of their time and energy. And when I think of Killjoy Solidarity, I think of that, turning up for each other because we recognise what each other is doing, what we are working for, who we are working for, and why that matters. When I left my academic job, my profession, my life really, Neela reached out to me. They wrote, it's scary to step off the known respectable, in brackets, ish, exclamation point, end of bracket, path. But the institutions need you much more than you need them. And then Neela offered to lend a hand. If you'd like to shout over strategies, ways of doing your kind of work outside the institutions, shout me. Shout me the kindness of that offer. Neela would send me photos of their beautiful cat and companion Gerbs. when I was struggling to pick up some of the pieces. And I would share with Neela photographs of Poppy, our beautiful dog. When I use words like Killjoy solidarity, it is also that sharing that comes to mind. The archive we create from bits and pieces of ourselves, what we give each other by sharing our love for our companions. I want to share with you now this artwork made to accompany the handbook by Rudy Lowe. Thank you so much, Rudy, for this beautiful piece. When I first saw this picture, Neela there with their beloved GURPS on their laps, surrounded by many, to capture so much of the feminist killjoys, to capture so many, I was overcome with grief, but also love and appreciation. We are that many around Neela. Survival is what we do for each other and with each other, becoming many. For some to survive the world, we need to transform it. But we still need to survive the world we are trying to transform. And some of us don't survive that world. Nim, Ralph, and Shamira Magani are here with me to share some thoughts about Neela. They are here as Neela's friends. Nim and Shamira gave these beautiful testimonials to Neela and Neela's work, and it felt very important to bring Neela into the room with us. In the second part of the launch, we focused on creativity and connection. Sometimes we can kill joy without saying or doing anything. We might refuse to laugh at a sexist or racist joke, for instance, and we can turn that into a killjoy maxim. But sometimes we have to work to express ourselves. It can be hard to find the words for it. Audre Lorde, who inspired so many of my words and so much of my work, once said, "That was the first cause of my writing, my need to say things I couldn't say otherwise, when I couldn't find other poems to serve." In her poem, Power, Audre Lorde suggests that poetry is not letting our power lie limp and useless as an unconnected wire. Lorde uses words like electricity, making a connection to others, keeping that connection alive, expressing something that is hard to express, letting the violence in so that she can get it out. It can be work to keep connections alive, and a past can be that connection. I think of an interview between Audre Lorde, Gail Lewis, and Pratika Palmer that was published in the Black British feminist classic, Charting the Journey, by Sheba Feminist Publishers in 1988. Lorde comments on its title. She says, "Charting the journey, that's what you mean, isn't it? How do we get from there to here? What you chart is already where you've been, but where we are going, there is no chart yet. We are brave and daring, and we are looking ahead." I learned so much from Charting the Journey, Feminist Killjoys, where we appear, also disappear. I think of Abda Bra's article, Journey to Nairobi, published in this collection. Bra describes how she was at a feminist conference and made a point that anti-racism should be a core feminist demand. But the journalist who reported back did not make that point. We learn how feminism became white feminism, not because Black and brown women were not there at this or that feminist event, but because we were not recorded as being there. Killjoy equation, white feminism equals blanking. And so the story of the feminist killjoy can be a story of broken connections. If it can help to know that where we are, others have been, it can sometimes require a political effort to know where others have been. We might have to look in the margins of books or at the edges of feminist spaces. Sometimes the edges are the best places to be, pockets of life in an otherwise hostile environment. I want to thank Abda Bra, Gail Lewis, and Heidi Mirza especially for all the work you've done to create a space for Black and brown feminist scholars in the UK, pockets of life and air in an otherwise hostile environment. pockets of life in the air. To chart the journey of feminist killjoys is to draw on those who came before. And let me mention here Emma Atta Ayudu's Our Sister Killjoy, which was published in 1977, which I consider the first attempt to give the killjoy a voice. Sissy, our narrator, is our sister Killjoy, and we travel with her as she gives serious speeches and offers serious critiques of the idealization of Europe, of whiteness, also of happiness. Michelle Cliff, in If I Could Write This in Fire, describes how she was inflamed by reading Our Sister Killjoy with its rage against colonialism, and how that freed her to direct rage outwards into creativity, so that if she could write this in fire, she would. And so she did, writing in fire, catching fire. Sherry Moraga's preface to the 4th edition of another classic, A Bitch Called My Back, is entitled Catching Fire. She writes, early edition copies, dog-eared and coffee-stained, have been passed from hand to hand, borrowed then borrowed again, and liberated from library shelves. I love this idea of feminist books being passed around, worn and weathered, liberated books, liberating books. Books can be feminist fire. I think of all those feminist fires being lit up, imaginations ignited, desires inflamed, rage also. The feminist killjoy can be a connection, igniting feminist fires both within and beyond the classroom. In the handbook, I've been inspired by how some feminist killjoys turned the feminist killjoy into a reading group. This one was organised in Sydney by Rajni Shah, and Rajni is here today. Thank you. We read books together, we create space for each other, and I have a recommended reading list for killjoys at the end of the handbook. The killjoy is a fiery figure. We can catch so much from them, and we can catch something from each other, something sometimes about ourselves. I think of one student who wrote to me, I am a feminist killjoy, and I didn't know these 2 words described everything I've ever been all my life. The feminist killjoy offers another way of describing ourselves, of being ourselves. There is creativity in description. I just want to share with you some of what has been shared with me as I've travelled with feminist killjoys. I think of all the feminist killjoy cards that have been given to me by students. Thank you so much for each of them. I carry them with me. When I went to one gender studies class taught by Tori Khan, I was given a card that said, High Priestess of Wokeness. This was how I've been described by an article in The Spectator. Killjoys. We claim the name, we turn the judgment into a project. When I left my job in protest at the failure of the university to deal with the problem of sexual harassment, students gave me a card thanking me for my act of political warfare. How I treasure the work that we did together, however much the wall stayed up. And I'd like to thank again Tiffany Page, Leila Whitley, Alice Corbell, Hardy Hasbrook, and Krista Sodrolia, as well as others I still cannot name. And I think of how after I left, other students whose names I don't know put words from my work onto the wall. Killjoy words. Yes, they were taken down, but they cannot stop them from having been there. I'm still touched by the beauty of this gesture. So connection can be about collection. Everywhere I've travelled, I've been given things. I call them Killjoy mementos. One class of students made badges and turned them into a poster, which I now have on my wall. One former student, Victoria Bennett, who I taught many years ago in women's studies at Lancaster, knitted me some Killjoy mittens. She wrote to me after, I hope they're keeping you warm. Another student, a PhD student, Morgan Conti, who is here today, gave me a Killjoy pin, which I like to wear. And yes, I do like to wear my arguments, and I'm aware of the risks that they'll wear out. I say in the handbook, it's a note to self, there is more to being a feminist killjoy than saying you are one or wearing a t-shirt, even though I do wear the t-shirts. Sometimes those t-shirts can be a snap, what we say or what we feel when we encounter each other wearing the same one, the joy of that. When I shared a photo of a Killjoy t-shirt, someone tweeted they didn't have a t-shirt, but they did have a tattoo. We communicate something of ourselves to each other, writing ourselves all over the place. And I think also of my companions, my furry ones, how you became part of that journey. And I think also of the Killjoy survival kits that have been assembled, and these are just two shared by J-Ran Fries and made by her students on her Women, Gender and Sexualities class. The feminist killjoy and her killjoy kin, queer killjoys, trans feminist killjoys, brown and black feminist killjoys can be turned into a shared resource for living stranger ways. Stranger ways is an odd word for an old wisdom, the wisdom of strangers, those who, in being estranged from worlds, notice them, those who, in being estranged from worlds, remake them. In fighting for room, we make something for ourselves. Killjoy truth. To make something is to make it possible. Possibility can still be a fight because we have to dismantle the systems that make so much and so many seem impossible. Still, this truth, which is not a truth in the actual handbook, I've elevated the sentence into a truth since, is closest to what I call Killjoy joy. Killjoy joy is how it feels to be involved together in crafting different worlds. We need joy to survive killing joy. We find joy in killing joy. I think of all the letters sent to me by feminist killjoys, how we reach each other. I think of what I have learned from picking up the figure of the feminist killjoy all those years ago and putting her to work. It is now my pleasure to invite Joan Anim Adu and Nori Masu to say a few words. I refer to Joan's poem, Another Doorway, in my chapter on the feminist killjoy as poet. And Joan has been fighting to make so much possible in her work on Caribbean women's writing and Black feminism. Noreen has just published a beautiful memoir, A Flat Place, a memoir that really made me think about how to tell different stories about ourselves and our past, attend to some of the violences that make that telling so strange and difficult. And then Noreen and Joan came and shared thoughts and reflections about their creative work. So thank you for listening, those of you who've listened, and I'm really sorry that I didn't get to share the recording of the actual launch with you. But these are just some of the words I shared on that night. And let me express to you again my Killjoy solidarity. Wishing you all the best.